Yes, good afternoon, everyone, and thank you so much for joining us. I am Cherilyn Jolly-Nagel, a farmer from Mossbank, and it is truly an honor to be here this afternoon for what I'm certain will be a heartwarming conversation. As many of you know, 2026 has been declared the International Year of the Woman Farmer, a global recognition of the incredible contributions women make to agriculture, to our families, and to our rural communities. And while that recognition is long overdue, this year is really about the stories behind the work. Because the truth is, women have always been at the heart of agriculture, not always the spotlight, but always essential. So I'm pleased to begin today's conversation by introducing our guest, whose work has helped bring those stories to light in such a powerful way. Billi J. Miller is an author, a photographer, and a storyteller who is dedicated to capturing the lives, the strength, and the quiet impact of farm women across generations. We're going to start with a short video that gives you a glimpse into Billi's work and the stories that she's helped bring to the world. So let's roll the video.
You know, I like to capture the pride of farm life and of the history that these farms have. And you know, that's something that I didn't have in my life. I lived in the city, I worked for the government, so I was a self-proclaimed city girl until 2009. I went on a fishing trip up to northern Saskatchewan to see my aunt and uncle. And there was a gentleman there named Charlie Miles. And he introduced me to a guy named Dean Miller. And Dean Miller was a farmer. And at the time I thought, what in the heck am I gonna do with a farmer? I live in the city. Yeah, and so fast forward to now, we've got 2 little girls and we live here. After we had our first child, I decided being home with them was going to be something that was important, but it was going to have to be in a way that kind of transitioned me well from working, you know, on my own, being financially self-sufficient, that kind of thing. So I started a business doing photography. And I ended up writing a book called Farm Wives in Profile. The book is about 17 traditional farm wives from this area. And I wanted to celebrate them. I wanted to honor them for their unbelievable commitment to their farms, but really their commitment to their families. These women are real matriarchs, they're really strong, they work so hard, and they're just so dedicated. There are lots of books about the history of farming, there are lots of books about the men and the work in the fields and the machinery and all of that kind of stuff, but I wanted something dedicated solely to the women, and that's what the book is.
But you would just laugh.
Yeah.
It's perfect. What was the best part for you in this life as a farm wife?
Freedom. I'd go back tomorrow.
In a second.
If I could.
Yeah.
Like, we never got holidays so much, but we worked together every day of the year, and
Yeah.
we did everything.
I think they're the pillars holding these communities up, I really do. They get the halls ready for this social event. They bring the food, they bring the baking. And then when it comes to farming and the meals in the field and harvest and seeding and all of that stuff, and just the huge job of looking after these kids and these families, they needed to be honored for that. You know, my family experience growing up has been somewhat of a broken one. So coming here and being able to be surrounded by permanence and pride for that, and you know, long-term marriage and having families that work together and play together and all of that kind of thing, like, I mean, that's just been, there's a magic involved in that, and it means the world that I get to show that.
Please welcome Billi J. Miller. I was just whispering in her ear because I'd seen the video before, but then I thought, you know, her story about farm women actually started with Dean Miller, the farmer. I thought I've never asked her about Dean. Do you want to, before we get into all of the women in your lives, throw a shout out to your husband, Dean?
Go Dean. He's Mr. Mumming it this week. Actually, he's Mr. Dadding it this week while I'm on a work trip. So he does a great job, and yeah, I love shouting out him.
A shout out to Dean. Billi, I enjoy seeing that video every time I see it. And the truth is, your work just has a way of making people feel seen and reminding us just how much agriculture has been built on stories. Can you tell us about that?
Yeah, I 100% agree with you. And so as the video alluded to, I wasn't raised on a farm. I wasn't raised in a farming community. And I would go on to write a second book after this one. So I have 2 books celebrating farm women. The first book was Farm Wives in Profile. I interviewed, like the video mentioned, 50 women between the ages of 55 and 90. They filled that traditional role. And I truly believe they deserve to be honored for that. I wanted to follow it up with a second book, Farm Wives 2, where a lovely full circle moment here is I got to interview Cherilyn among many other women from the younger generations between the ages of 20s and 50s. I wanted to kind of talk about how lives on farms were changing for women. As we all know, roles are evolving, roles are changing, but I feel like it's such a special life, and because I came in with that lens of not being raised on a farm, I just feel it's so special ever since I landed on one, and I just kind of wanted to hold those women up for everything they've done,
So great. Well, I know you have a million stories to share, and it's not like picking favorites, but we want to hear some of those stories and maybe some of those that have had a lasting impression on you.
So many. The first book had 17 women. I ended up making my second book. I mean, there are so many incredible stories out there. And the second book had even more women. So Edith is this woman that was in the video here. She is someone that was specifically mentioned and recommended to me that I put in my first book by a friend. And I'm so glad she did, because it was her husband's grandmother, and we got to be fast friends. So meeting her and her husband, her husband sadly passed away during the writing of the book. So I didn't get to present the book to him, but I did get to Edith. And when I went to their apartment to meet with them, I sat down with them, and her husband, Albert, was really quite a character. And so he said to me, he's like, "So you're the city girl that married that Dean Miller, eh?" He knew all about me somehow. You know how small communities work, right? And anyway, so we got to spending, I bet you, about 3 hours sitting at their kitchen table, just visiting, and I had the loveliest time with them. And all of a sudden, Albert got up, and he got a copy of a photo album, and he brought it over to me. And he flipped it open to a page that looked like a letter. And it was a letter with, like, the Queen's crest on the top. And he goes, "You know what this means?" And I go, "No, Albert, what is that?" And he goes, "Well, it's a letter. It's a letter from the goddamn Queen," he said. I was like, oh my goodness, I don't know that you're allowed to say those 2 things in one sentence. But anyway. And he goes, "You know why we got it?" And I said, "No, tell me." Well, they had been married 60 years. And he goes, "It means we're GD important. That's what that means," he said. You know, things like that, like just really special kind of meetings with people. And she was incredible. And there's another woman that was in the photograph in that video too. Her name was June Stone. And so, like I said, they were in that traditional role, but she was so interesting to me too, because one of her answers to the interview questions was her advice that you would give new farm women today. And she said, "Never start out doing anything early in your marriage that you don't want to have to be stuck doing for 25, 30, and 50 years. And I thought, yes. And I thought, for that age, like, how brilliant is that, right? I thought it was so interesting. And just so many people. Cherilyn, I loved your interview. Cherilyn was in the Farm Wives 2, an inspiring look at the new Canadian farm wives. And she had said at the time that, which would have been probably 6 or 7 years ago now that I interviewed you for it, but she had said that every year she takes a solo trip without her husband and without her kids. And speaking to a fellow absolute travel lover, I thought that was really incredible, you know, that someone took that time out to do that for themselves, and what an incredible kind of lesson that is for women all over. I could go on and on. The stories are really countless, but yeah.
Well, I want to take a step back then, because I'm curious about the process of the interviews. And you mentioned in particular that you were at the kitchen table. Mm-hmm. And for me, growing up on a farm, living next door to my grandparents, the kitchen table was really and truly the most important piece of furniture that we had in any of our houses. That's where we sat to eat, but that's where the conversations happened. That's where you invited guests to come in. Were the majority of your interviews conducted at a kitchen table? And do you have any reflections about those various kitchen tables that you had the honor to sit at?
For my first book, many of them were done at the kitchen table, and I'm so honored for that and so grateful for that time with them. And yeah, because a lot of stories came out that weren't put in the book, you know, a lot of real honest kind of tidbits or advice or just stories about different losses that these women, experienced. Also, something to be said about the first book was all of those women are my neighbors. They literally all live within like the rural Lloydminster area, and I'm 20 minutes southwest of Lloydminster. So they all knew each other. So it's kind of interesting, though, to think when they answered their questions, a lot of them kind of mentioned to me that, you know, I wanted to say this, but I didn't know if so-and-so would say that, and I didn't know if it would be okay to say that. So, you know, so that was kind of really interesting. But the second book, as you know, I interviewed people from across the country for that one, just to kind of broaden that conversation and that perspective. And so I didn't have the luxury or the budget, or, you know, I'm self-published. I did everything kind of on my own expense until the books came out. And I didn't have the luxury of sitting at all their kitchen table. So thanks to technology and all of those other kinds of things, we emailed questions and answers back. And that worked just lovely too. But there truly was nothing more magical than, being able to sit at the kitchen tables with these women and have them kind of share their hearts with me. I'm really grateful for that.
Well, I would imagine that most women are a bit skeptical, or were a bit skeptical, especially in that first book, about why you would be curious about their life. Maybe some of the moments were even a bit private. But what, from your experience, happens when their stories are shared?
That's such a good question. More than one of them, and I say this in every talk that I've done, when they ask why I wrote this book and why it was so important for me to do that, more than one woman said to me in the process of being interviewed, I don't understand why you want me for this. Like, I haven't done anything. I'm just a farm wife. And I thought, you haven't done anything. I mean, you know, like, when I got to this community, I said to my husband, I felt like there was just this buzzing of women working and, you know, hauling meals to the field and bringing food to the community halls for these events and doing all of these sorts of things and doing the farm books and running kids to sports and, you know, doing the books and the countless things they do to keep these families, these farms and these entire communities running. And I said to my husband, I said, if it wasn't for people like your mom and her friends around her, these communities would crumble. I truly, truly believe that. And that was why I wanted to do the book, and that was why it was important to me to do that. And so to be able to, and then to answer the second part of that question is what happens when these women are seen for what they did. My book launch night for that first book was something that was so incredibly special to me. And we filled a restaurant in Lloydminster, and they were allowed to bring their spouses if he was still living and one other person. So they all arrived, they had their freshly printed book sitting at their table waiting for them. And when they actually realized, like, it was a book, like it was an actual thing, and more than that, when they realized that, like, all the local media showed up to video them and to take photos of them and interview them for the newspaper, a lot of these women were in absolute tears, you know, and it was so incredible for me. And I was like, that is why, you know, your stories really do mean something.
So from the start of writing the first book, interviewing the first group of women, and through the second book and up until now, was there a moment or moments along the way where you were witness to a changing role for women in the agriculture industry?
Yeah, actually, like, a lot of the women that I interviewed for my second book, so I interviewed myself. I thought it was only fair to answer the same questions I was posing to many other women. My sister-in-law, people like Cherilyn, and many other women. I discovered, yeah, like, those younger marriages and those younger families, I guess. Like, when I met my husband, I was 34. He was already 34. So I was already kind of established in my career at that time. And because I wasn't raised on a farm, when I married into his family and, you know, started my life and my marriage with him, I didn't automatically just say I was a farmer all of a sudden, because I just didn't feel like I was, you know, and nor did he say he was all of a sudden a government worker, right? So it was this blending of a life and blending of a family that we kind of did. And so I'm not saying, you know, we precipitated the change, but yeah, there definitely has been a change. There has been evolving roles. I think we all know that. We all see that. And I think that's incredible.
One thing I've noticed in agriculture in terms of the farm wife piece of occupation is that there really isn't other occupations where the spouse identifies that way. It's a very unique part of agriculture. And it's maybe been considered a derogatory term for what we do in the past. And I remember, for me, I grew up on a farm. I witnessed the most beautiful farm women in my family and in my community. But I think if there was one thing I knew for sure, it was that I was not going to be a farmer when I graduated. I didn't see that that would be a role for me. So I had to come full circle in appreciation of what it meant to be a farmer, but also to try to define it. And it's unclear, the definition of a farmer. You know, I see James is here as an accountant. There's probably some pretty clear certifications that you have to meet that. And after years of being back home on the farm with my husband, I remember a moment filling out paperwork. I think it was just at a doctor's office, and occupation was listed on there. And it really, truly gave me pause. I wasn't certain. Well, I've been here for quite a while. I didn't know what to write under occupation, if it was farmer, if it was farmer wife, or, you know, how should I identify with this occupational piece of the job? Did you find that confusion with other women that you interviewed?
Absolutely, and I'm really glad you mentioned that, because we discussed this, and I was nervous approaching a lot of the women for my second book that I did. I thought, like, because a lot of these people, I did want that varying voice in that book. I wanted women who are marrying into a farm, you know, a farm family today. There are many of them who don't feel like, you know, who don't feel close or accustomed to that traditional role of a farm wife. I wanted them to feel like there was room for them too. And I knew in order to do that, there was going to have to be voices and other people speaking, showing them that that's okay, and that there are, you know, I think it's important to create the role that works best for you. And, but Cherilyn was one of those people I was a little bit nervous to ask, you know. I'm writing a book called Farm Wives too, and I'd like to, you know, but no one was forced to be in the book, obviously, and everyone agreed, and everybody was happy to express how they do things in their life and how they do things on their farm. And that's why I'm just so proud of how it turned out, because I think it's a really reflective diverse voice of how farms look today in Canada, and it looks really incredible.
Yeah, and things have just really, truly changed throughout
Yeah.
the generations. And so I think maybe it's, on that note, it's probably a really good time for us to welcome another guest to the stage, someone that you interviewed in your Farm Kids book. I know her well. She is my daughter, Claire Nagel. Welcome, Claire. How fun is it to be able to say I'm in a book? That's a pretty nice flex.
Yeah, it's definitely something to put on the resume.
Yep. Can you share with us your life growing up on a farm, just your experience being a farm kid?
Yeah, so I was born and raised on my farm in Mossbank, and I could not be more grateful for the opportunities that has given me in my life. I mean, I've been able to learn how to operate equipment. I've had some training in accounting. I've been able to explore being a chef. I've been able to try on all these different hats just to see what I really wanted to do with my future, and I wouldn't trade it for anything.
So how has your role on the farm changed from when you were much smaller? I do recall a princess dress and some high heels in the field. So from that to where you are now, what do you feel like your role has been on the farm?
Yeah, so kind of as I said, I've been able to try on lots of different hats. I mean, I remember being 7 years old and out hand-picking rocks in the garden, and then I got to run an actual rock picker, and then I got to run the land roller and the grain cart. I got to work in the kitchen, got to do part of like what Billy was saying, when you get to cook and bring it out to the field and you see the smiles on the guys' faces because they've been starving since 3. And then recently into some bookkeeping, so I've definitely seen my role on the farm evolve a lot throughout the years.
And you've become a pretty important part of the farm operation, truthfully, you and your sister. So full disclosure, there are 2 girls on our farm. Addison is my other daughter. And when I asked her if she would like to come on stage as well, she legitimately gave me the finger. So we have Claire who's here today. Claire, as your mom, I know that you are crazy busy getting yourself involved in all kinds of other off-farm extracurricular activities. Can you talk about some of the things that you're up to and the different opportunities that have come your way in the agriculture industry already?
Yeah, so I'm not an agro at the U of S, but I am going to the U of S right now. I'm in political studies, so I'm kind of involved in a couple of different campus groups in that area. I've had a couple of job opportunities through the farm, just talking to different reps from different companies that come and do some work on our farm. And then the one that I'm most excited about right now is I recently joined the Saskyoung Ag Board of Directors, and I've been doing lots of work in that. And that's something that really excites me. I'm able to come out and just promote jobs in agriculture for young people. And I think it's really important that people my age, younger, older, just see the opportunities that are available to them in the agriculture industry in Saskatchewan.
Billy, you had the chance to interview Claire a number of years ago for your Farm Kids book. We didn't really discuss that book yet, but what impressions were left with you from meeting Claire and interviewing her, but all of the fabulous kids that you had a chance to meet? Do you have any stories you want to share from your Farm Kids interviews?
Absolutely. And I'm not just saying this because she's beside me, but her interview is truly, truly one of the most touching that I've read. And so my Farm Kids book I expanded interviewing again into farmers and farm lives and all the wonderful people on them. But I interviewed men and women, boys and girls between the ages of 5 through 100 about what life was like raised as a farm kid through the ages. Because, and like I start that book with, I have truly never met one person that was raised as a farm kid who regretted being raised that way, ever, in my life, since I've come into this life. And it's been such a touching thing for me to experience, and then talking to people all through, their years, right? All a variety of ages. But Claire's interview was so lovely to me, And she can maybe later explain why, what point she was at in her life to answer those questions the way she did. But listening to how she reflected on her mom and her dad and her life growing up, and how she viewed her mom, how she viewed her dad, and how grateful she was for the experiences that she grew up having. And that was so lovely to me and so refreshing for me to hear from a girl the age that she was. It was just, it seemed really beyond her years. And it made me so, so incredibly grateful that I am raising two girls who were in that video, but who are now 14 and 12. And yeah, so I'd love to hear more about where you were in that light at the time I interviewed you.
Do you remember the interview? Okay.
Very well. I remember that interview. I was just down the street living in the dorms at Luther College here. It was kind of my first experience living off the farm. I was 15 years old and stuck in a dorm room. Having grown up on a farm where I could run around outside wherever I wanted without having to ask my RAs, this was very hard for me. So I was longing for the farm. I was feeling very grateful to have grown up on a farm and just kind of reminiscing on the good old days as a 15-year-old. But and I would come home for the weekends and I was outside the whole time because it was like, I'm finally back.
And you grew an appreciation for it. Did you have an appreciation before you weren't a farm kid when you moved to the city?
I understood the value in it, but I didn't fully understand all of the opportunities that I had as a farm kid. I took my driver training here in Regina at Luther, and I was the only person who had ever driven before, driven anything before. Yeah, so it definitely helped me grow my appreciation for life on the farm and for my parents and just the way I was raised in general. Yeah.
So, Billi, you've just been an observer of farm women throughout this entire experience. So, can you share with us where you now observe women to be having the biggest impacts in the agriculture industry?
Where aren't they having the biggest impact, really? Oh, yeah, I'm glad you feel that because I really like, I believe thanks to the women that came before us and thanks to like many of the, the thousands upon thousands of women that were just like those in my first book, because of all they've done, because of the kids that they raised, because of the families they've nurtured, and because of who they are, but because of their, everything that was put on their backs, as they said in many cases, without running water, don't forget. I mean, it's incredible. But because of them, I think all of us now can truly do whatever it is that we want. If you don't want to be a traditional farm wife, don't be one. If you want to wear the farm wife title proudly, like honestly, I do. I love it, then you can. But I think if you want to do something else, you can. If you want to work for a chemical company, if you want to work, become an MLA and, work for farmers, you can. I think that there's so many different things that we can do. And there's truly nothing stopping us. I mean, there are still changes that need to be made. We could talk about the invisible labor of women, et cetera, et cetera. I mean, there's lots of conversation to be had, but I think that we're making changes all over the place, and I think that we still have to continue doing that.
Do you have any advice for women who might need encouragement to see value in the work that they're doing on the farm, regardless of what that work looks like? Do you have any advice to encourage them to see value in that?
I'm going to go back to your interview again for a second. I can't remember exactly the way the question was worded. I don't know who wrote it, but anyway. It was kind of like asking what your role looked like on your farm. I feel like when I wrote that book, I was kind of at a point where I was looking for validation a little bit, because I wasn't doing things exactly like my mother-in-law, for example, right? And I think I was looking for validation and encouragement from these other really incredible women. Cherilyn said something where she talked about her role. She said, you know, she talked about the things that she does. She said she wears, it depends what day as to what hat she's wearing, for example. She said, my kids are at home, so my primary role are getting my kids from point A to point B, which is my role right now. I'm in the thick of that. But she also talked about, you know, she shares some meals, but something else she said, she really, she manages, does a lot of the relationship management, I believe, was your wording, the way you put it. And I remember reading that, and I was like, yes, I do that too. You know, like, it was just kind of, so I guess, you know, to go back to your question and not make it just about me, I guess I just feel like we all need to really sit and look at what we do on a day-to-day basis, because we do a lot, you know, whether you have kids or not, whether you're working full-time on the farm or not, whether you're working off the farm or not. We all do so much. And I think it is proof, though. I mean, I believe that we all want to be seen for that, right? So I guess make sure and kind of demand that you're appreciated for that in your family. And it comes down to you appreciating yourself and really believing that what you are doing is important. You are, for those of us that are mothers, you're raising kids. You're raising the next generations, right? So hold your head up high for everything that you do. It's truly incredible.
Well, Claire, if there's a young girl sitting in this audience today in the very front row, and if she's thinking about a future in agriculture, what would you want her to know?
Growing up on a farm, I had a great experience. I mean, you can't talk about being a woman in any industry without, I guess, acknowledging that, yes, there might be sexism or like some discrimination that you might face. Me personally, I've had an amazing experience. All of the men and women in my life have been so supportive. If you can build yourself that support system, then you can try anything you want. You can try running equipment. You can go and get your 1A. You can do all of these different things. I mean, there are barriers. I've found the worst ones are the physical ones because I can't open the hood on my tractor. But I've never felt that any man in my life that I've had to call to come and help me with that has ever looked down at me or underestimated me or discriminated against me because I'm a woman. I think it's really important to know that you really can just try out whatever job you want to try out.
So good, really, really good. Billi, are there some other stories that you want to share today that we haven't been able to touch on?
Yeah, there is one more big one, but I first want to go back to what Claire just said. And I want to say that's really credit to you and your husband that she was raised that way, believing that she could truly do anything. And your dad, I know the way that you reflected on him and stuff, truly. I know we're all talking about women here, but how you are raising these kids is so incredibly important. And if your dad is looking at you as a young girl saying, come on out here, let's try to run the tractor. My daughter Kate was 6 when she did her first oil change on my car with her dad. And I remember like never almost loving my husband more, the fact that he was doing that. You know, stuff like that is really meaningful. But one really kind of important story that I wanted to share about my interviews wasn't really the interview after all. It was really more, so this woman Edith, I talk a lot about her, not to pick favorites, but she was really just so lovely. And we visited a lot and shared a lot of teas together. But something I wanted to do after my interviews of my first book was on the fly and kind of behind their backs, I wanted to speak to their families. And so I asked them if they could write a little piece for me that I could put in the book about, tell me about the impact your mother has had on your life. And so because of the ages, as you know, these kids, quote unquote kids now, we're all grown, raising families and sometimes grandkids of their own. And at first I didn't want to tell the women because I wanted them to just see it in the book, but because of the ages of them, I knew I kind of had to give their letters right away because I didn't want anything to happen to one of them and have them not see the words. But the words I read from these families, reflecting on their years of watching their mom in the garden and watching their mom bake fresh baked bread and, you know, do all of these things they did for their families and raising their families, was the most incredible thing. And so I went to Edith's house one day and I presented her with the letter from her family. And I remember watching this woman sit at her kitchen table, and I'm not gonna cry, and tears ran down her face. And it's not that her family wasn't appreciative, they're a beautiful, beautiful family, but for her to really see that in such a concrete way was everything. Like, it was the most incredible experience, honestly, from all of my books, truly.
Thank you. Yeah. Thank you so much for sharing all of that with us, both of you. And I want to thank you for being here, but also to let audience members know, Billi does have some copies of her book here, so it's an opportunity for you to grab a copy and have a signed copy over here. Thank you, James. So if you haven't got a copy yet, there are some here. And where else can people buy the remainder of the books that you've written?
Oh, well, thank you so much. So yeah, I unfortunately only have copies of my most recent Farm Kids book, but it has in the pages all the information of my other books. My books are available anywhere online, Amazon, Chapters, or my website, billijmiller.com. You can order them for me for a signed copy as well. But you can look me up online, and my books are available anywhere online where books are sold, so.
Very good. Well, thank you to both of you for your honesty, your stories, and the work that you continue to do in the agriculture industry. And thank you to all of you for joining us for the conversation today. We appreciate it.